I used to believe that some people were just good, not perfect, not without flaws, but fundamentally, genuinely good. My wife Claire was one of those people, at least. That's what I told myself for 7 years. 7 years of mortgage payments and Sunday morning pancakes and arguments about whose turn it was to take out the trash. 7 years of building something I thought was real. Something I thought was ours. I was wrong. And the worst part? The signs were always there. I just didn't want to see them. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not the beginning of the marriage. The beginning of the end, it was a Tuesday in October. I remember because the leaves had just started turning, that deep, amber and rust red that always made the street outside our house look like something out of a painting. I'd been working back-to-back projects for almost 3 weeks straight. Construction management. It sounds glamorous when you say it fast, but really it's spreadsheets and subcontractors, and site visits at 6 in the morning. When the temperature hasn't cracked 40 degrees yet, I was exhausted. I came home that Tuesday around 4 in the afternoon, 2 hours earlier than usual because a supplier meeting had been pushed to the following week. I remember sitting in the driveway for a few minutes before going in, just sitting there, listening to the engine tick as it cooled down. Watching the light change through the trees, I was so tired, bone tired, the kind of tired that doesn't go away with sleep. I finally got out of the truck and walked to the front door. I could hear music playing faintly inside, something soft and low. I put my key in the lock, turned it, pushed the door open, and then I heard her. She was in the kitchen, standing by the window with her back to me, phone pressed to her ear. She hadn't heard me come in because the music was covering the sound of the door. She was laughing. Not the way she laughed with me. Not that quick, slightly snorting laugh she'd do when something caught her off guard. This was different. This was slow, warm, intimate. The kind of laugh that belongs in a private space, between two people who are sharing something neither of them wants the rest of the world to know about. Stood in the entryway. Didn't move. Barely breathed. I know, she was saying softly. Stop it. You're ridiculous. She laughed again. That same low, tender laugh. Then she turned around. Her eyes found me immediately, and just like that, the laugh vanished. The warmth drained from her face so fast it was almost physical. Like watching a light switch get flipped off. Hey, she said into the phone. I have to go. I'll talk to you later. She hung up before the other person could respond. Hey, you, she said to me, already moving toward the counter, already putting distance between herself and what I'd just witnessed. You're home early. Meeting got pushed, I said. I kept my voice totally flat, neutral. Who was on the phone? She didn't skip a beat. That was Donna, from my old job. She's going through a hard time with her divorce and just needed to vent. She said it so smoothly, so easily, and maybe, if I hadn't heard the way she'd been laughing, I would have believed her, but I had heard it, and something deep in my gut, something I couldn't name and couldn't ignore, told me that what I'd just witnessed had nothing to do with Donna from the old job, nothing at all. I let it go that night. I made myself let it go. We had dinner together. She told me about her day. I told her about mine. We watched TV, we went to bed. Everything was normal on the surface, but underneath, something had shifted, like a hairline crack in a foundation wall. You can't always see it. You can walk on that floor 1,000 times and never notice. But the crack is there, and it's spreading. I started paying attention. Not in an obvious way. I wasn't going through her phone or following her around or demanding explanations. I was just watching. The way I watch a construction site when I know something isn't right but I haven't figured out what it is yet. Quietly, carefully, taking notes in the back of my mind. And once I started looking, I couldn't stop seeing things. The way she angled her phone screen away from me whenever a notification came through. The way she sometimes went quiet mid-conversation. Not distracted, but listening for something. The way she'd excuse herself to use the bathroom in the middle of dinner and come back 5 minutes later slightly flushed, fingers moving a little too deliberately as she set her phone face down on the table. I told myself I was being paranoid, told myself that constantly, but then came the Friday nights. Claire had always been a homebody on weekends. That was one of the things I'd loved about her early on. She had no problem saying no to plans, no fear of missing out, no need to be everywhere all the time. We used to spend Friday nights cooking together, splitting a bottle of wine, sometimes just reading in the same room. It was quiet and easy and good, but sometime in the past few months, and I'm sitting here trying to figure out exactly when it started, and I genuinely can't pinpoint it, Friday nights had changed. She'd started going out, girls' nights, she called them. Her friend group from her spin class. They'd try different restaurants or go to that wine bar downtown. Or just hang out at someone's place once a month. I could live with that. But it had become every single Friday, and not just every Friday. She was coming home later and later each time. 11, midnight. Once, at almost 1:30 in the morning, I'd be awake when she got back. Not because I was suspicious, or not only because of that, but because I'm a light sleeper, and the sound of the garage door always woke me up. I'd listen to her come in, hear the quiet sounds of her moving through the house, and then she'd slip into bed beside me smelling like perfume and wine and something else I couldn't quite identify. "Good night?" I'd ask. "The best," she'd say, and she always sounded so genuinely happy that almost made it worse. The moment everything became undeniable happened on a Saturday morning in November. Claire was in the shower. I was in the bedroom getting dressed, and her phone was sitting on the nightstand charging. I wasn't going to look at it. I want to be clear about that. I was making a conscious choice not to look at it, because looking at it meant accepting that something was wrong, and I wasn't ready to accept that yet. But the phone lit up. A message preview. Just sitting right there on the lock screen, I didn't go looking for it. I didn't snoop. It was just there. I looked because I'm human, and what I read, 3 sentences. That's all it took. 3 sentences to destroy 7 years. I won't repeat them word for word. Even now it hurts in a way I can't fully explain. But the meaning was unmistakable. Someone, a man based on the name, was telling my wife that he couldn't stop thinking about the night before. That she was extraordinary. That he was already counting the days until he could see her again. I put my shirt on. I picked up my wallet and my keys. I walked to the kitchen. I stood at the sink and turned on the cold water and just held my hands under it, stood there for maybe 2 minutes, feeling the cold, focusing on that one physical sensation, because if I focused on anything else, on what I'd just read, on what it meant, on the 7 years, on the Sunday morning pancakes and the mortgage and the life I thought we had, I was going to lose it, and I couldn't afford to lose it. Not yet, not here, not like this. Claire came out of the shower 20 minutes later, hair wrapped in a towel. She walked past me in the kitchen, kissed me on the cheek, asked if I wanted to go to the farmer's market. "Sure," I said. We went to the farmer's market. I bought apples and fresh bread. She held my hand the whole time, and the entire time. I kept thinking, she thinks I don't know. She thinks I have no idea. She is completely certain that she has this under control, and somewhere in the fog of pain and grief and disbelief swirling through my chest, I felt something else start to form, something cold, something deliberate, a plan. I made a decision that Saturday I wasn't going to confront her. Not right away. I wasn't going to yell or demand answers or dissolve into a mess of tears and accusations in my own kitchen. That's what she would expect. That's what most people would do, and I understood why. When someone betrays you like that, the immediate instinct is to let the wound drive you, to lash out, to demand the pain stop. But I'd spent 15 years in construction management. You know what you learn. Spending 15 years managing complex projects with 100 moving parts and a dozen different contractors who all have their own agendas and a client who changes their mind every other week. You learn not to react. You learn to observe first. You learn that the person who acts on incomplete information almost always makes the problem. Worse, I needed complete information, and I needed time, so I gave myself both. I went back to being the husband I'd always been. Or rather, I played the role of the husband I'd always been. I was attentive, present. I cooked dinner twice a week. I remembered to ask about her friends, her work, her little projects. I was warm and engaged and entirely convincingly oblivious. It was the hardest performance of my life. There were moments, and I'm not going to pretend there weren't, where I almost broke. Like the Thursday night she got a phone call during dinner and excused herself to take it in the other room. And I sat at the table staring at my plate and thinking, this is happening. Right now, in my house. At my dinner table, this is happening. Or the Sunday she came back from the gym. She'd joined a new gym, by the way, which I now understood had nothing to do with fitness. And she was glowing. Not the kind of glow from exercise. The other kind. I smiled at her and asked how the workout was. Amazing, she said. I feel incredible. Good, I said, and went back to reading my book. But underneath, I was building a file. I'm not going to get into all the details of how I gathered everything. Some of it was straightforward, checking our shared accounts and noticing withdrawals I couldn't account for. Hotel reservations made on a credit card she didn't think I knew about. A storage app on her phone that backed up automatically to our shared family cloud. She'd forgotten I had access to it, and she'd forgotten because she thought I was completely trusting and somewhat technically oblivious. I was neither of those things, I found. Photos. I found messages. I found a timeline stretching. Back almost 8 months. 8 months. I sat with that number for a long time. 8 months of lies. 8 months of manufactured reasons to be somewhere else. 8 months of me kissing her goodbye in the morning and her kissing me back. And the whole time, the entire time, she was somewhere else in her head. With someone else. His name was Marcus. He was a personal trainer, which explained the gym, which explained the glow, which explained everything about the last 8 months of my life. And here is the part of the story that changes everything. The part that took me from wounded and devastated to completely, utterly composed. Marcus had no idea she was married. I know that because I looked him up. Because in this world, people leave trails. Digital trails, social trails, real-world trails. And Marcus had a public Instagram, and on that Instagram was a man who posted workout videos and motivational quotes and occasional glimpses of his personal life. And nowhere, not once, not in a single post or comment or story, was there any indication that he knew the woman he was seeing had a husband at home? Claire had built an entire alternate identity. She wasn't wearing her ring when she went to the gym. I knew because I'd found photos where her hands were visible and her ring finger was bare. She'd told him she was single. Probably told him she'd just moved to the area. Or some other clean lie that explained why he'd never met her friends or her family or been to her home. She had built a parallel life, and Marcus was living in it. Completely unaware. I sat with that information for a while, too. And then I contacted him, anonymously at first. I created an email address with no identifying information, and I sent him a short message. Nothing dramatic. Nothing angry. Just, the woman you've been seeing has a husband. She's been lying to you. He didn't respond. Then, 3 days later, I mailed him something, a physical envelope. Inside, 5 photographs from our wedding. Printed clearly, our names written on the back, our wedding date. And 1 additional photo, from about 18 months ago, taken on vacation in Maine, both of us laughing on a dock with the water behind us. We looked happy. We were happy, or I thought we were. 1 week after I mailed that envelope, Marcus disappeared from Claire's life. Just like that. I watched it happen from the inside. She was trying to reach him and getting nothing. I could see it in the way her face changed when she looked at her phone. The slight tightening around her eyes, the tiny frown she'd try to smooth away before she looked up. She texted him. I knew because I'd see her typing with that particular focused tension. And he wasn't responding. She didn't understand why. She had no frame of reference for what had just happened to her. Because the only person who could have told Marcus the truth was the husband she was certain had no idea anything was wrong. She thought she was invisible. She thought she was untouchable, and instead, her carefully constructed second world had just collapsed. Silently, without warning, without explanation. The weeks that followed were some of the strangest of my life. Watched Claire quietly fall apart while maintaining the complete illusion that everything between us was fine. She became distracted, anxious. She'd reach for her phone constantly. She stopped going out on Friday nights, which was almost cruelly ironic, given what those Friday nights had actually been. She became more present at home, almost clingy in a way she hadn't been in months. I think part of her, in the confusion and the loss of Marcus, had turned back toward our marriage for stability. She started being affectionate again, leaving little notes on the counter, suggesting weekend trips, telling me she loved me more frequently, with an emphasis, a weight, that I recognized as guilt dressed up as tenderness. It was almost painful to watch, because part of me, and I want to be honest about this, part of me was still grieving. I wasn't just angry. I was heartbroken. I was sitting across the dinner table from a woman I had loved completely and trusted entirely, and everything I had believed about our life together had been revealed as a fiction. Not a small lie. A sustained, deliberate, 8-month double life that breaks something in a person. It broke something in me. I just didn't let her see it. At night, after she'd fallen asleep, I'd lie awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and I'd think about all the moments I'd misread. All the times she'd been distracted and I'd attributed it to stress. All the times she'd come home glowing and I'd been proud of her for taking care of herself. All the small, quiet moments of domestic ordinariness that I now understood had been built on a foundation of deception. 7 years. I kept coming back to that number. 7 years. And somewhere in those sleepless nights, the grief slowly, gradually hardened into something else. Not rage, resolve. I want to tell you about a moment that happened about 6 weeks into this period. It was a weeknight. Claire had made dinner, something she'd been doing more often lately, another guilt gesture, and we were eating together and she was telling me about a podcast she'd been listening to. Something about relationships and communication and how couples sometimes grow apart without realizing it. She said, "I feel like we're really solid, you know? Like, I think about other couples and all the problems they have, and I feel grateful that we don't have that." I looked at her across the table. I looked at this woman I had loved for 7 years, and I said, "Yeah, me too." And she smiled, she genuinely smiled, and I smiled back, and I thought, this is what she has reduced me to. Sitting in my own home, at my own table, eating food she cooked out of guilt, and smiling at her while she talks about gratitude and solid foundations. That was the moment I stopped, doubting myself. That was the moment I committed. Completely, everything was going to come out, every single thing. But on my terms and my time, in the way I chose. I spent the next several weeks making arrangements, legal arrangements first. I'd already spoken quietly to a divorce attorney, a consultation. Nothing signed yet. And I knew exactly what my rights were, what I was entitled to, and what steps I needed to take to protect myself financially. I wasn't going to be caught off guard. I wasn't going to be in a position where the shock of the confrontation left me vulnerable. I organized everything into a folder on my laptop, bank records, timestamps, hotel, bookings cross-referenced with the dates she'd claimed to be elsewhere, screenshots of messages from the backup I'd accessed, the photos from her phone, a carefully maintained log, almost clinical in its precision, of every piece of evidence I had accumulated. It was thorough. It was, honestly, more thorough than most of the project documentation I put together for work. I also spoke to both of our families, not all at once, not dramatically, just quiet, private conversations that planted seeds. I told Claire's mother that I'd been feeling some distance lately and was concerned about the health of the marriage. I said it with enough vulnerability that her mother, who had always liked me, felt for me. She hadn't noticed anything specific, she said, but she'd keep an eye out. I told my own family the truth, my brother, my parents. A small circle. I didn't do this out of cruelty. I did it because when everything came to light, I didn't want to be the one scrambling to explain myself. I didn't want to be in a position where Claire's version of events got to the people I loved before my own. By the time our anniversary arrived, I had covered every angle I could think of. The lease on our apartment was up for renewal in 2 months. I'd quietly declined to renew it without telling her. I'd consulted with the attorney a second time and had the paperwork prepared. I'd separated my finances carefully, everything I was legally entitled to, documented, accounted for. The stage was set. All I needed was the right moment, and our anniversary dinner felt like exactly the right moment. Claire chose the restaurant. Of course she did. She'd been so attentive lately, so focused on gestures of affection. She picked somewhere downtown that we'd always talked about trying but never had. Nice place, white tablecloths, the kind of lighting that makes everyone look a little better than they are. She got dressed up. I watched her, getting ready that evening, and I thought about the first time I'd ever seen her dressed up, a mutual friend's wedding. Years before we were together, and how I'd thought she was the most beautiful person in the room. And she was beautiful tonight, too. She hadn't changed. What had changed was everything I knew about her. We had a lovely dinner. No, I want to be precise. The dinner was lovely in the way a performance is lovely. The food was good. The wine was good. She was charming and warm and attentive. She asked about my projects. She talked about plans she wanted to make, a trip she'd been researching, something about the coast, a cabin rental. She was planning a future for an anniversary that wasn't going to have one. We ordered dessert, and somewhere between the dessert arriving and the first bite, something shifted in her energy. She looked across the table at me with a kind of soft, almost wistful expression, the kind of expression that belongs to someone who knows they've made mistakes and is hoping that love is enough to cover them. She reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "I am so lucky. I want you to know that. Whatever happens, whatever life throws at us, I'm so glad it's with you." I held her hand, looked her in the eyes. "Claire," I said. "Yeah, I have something for you." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket, pulled out an envelope, plain white envelope. Her name written on the front in my handwriting. She smiled, that curious, expecting something sweet smile. "What is this?" "Just something I put together," I said. "Open it." She opened it. I watched her face. I'd spent months imagining this moment. In some versions, I'd imagined feeling triumphant, vindicated, powerful. In other versions, I'd imagined feeling nothing, just cold and empty and done. What I actually felt was grief, raw, unexpected, overwhelming grief. Because watching her face change, watching the warmth drain away and the color leave and the smile falter and the eyes go wide and then still, was watching someone I had loved be dismantled in real time, even after everything, even knowing everything I knew. It hurt. She looked up at me. "This isn't," she started. "It is," I said. "I can explain. There's more in there," I said. She looked back down. She saw the attorney's paperwork. She saw the lease notification. She saw the financial documentation. She saw the brief letters I'd written to both of our families, summaries of what had happened, factual and calm, ready to be sent. Her hands were shaking. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "Long enough. I'm sorry." Her voice broke on that. "I am so sorry. It wasn't. It didn't mean anything, I swear to you. It was a mistake, and I ended it, and I—" "You didn't end it," I said quietly. "I ended it for you." She stared at me. "Marcus got an envelope about a month ago," I said. "With our wedding photos inside." The color completely left her face. "I'm not angry," I said. "And I meant that. I genuinely meant it. I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here because I needed to do this right. I needed to do this with my self-respect intact. Please," she said. "Please, can we talk about this? Can we go home and talk? I'll tell you everything. I'll do whatever you need. Therapy, anything. Please, I don't want to lose you." I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about the driveway, the amber leaves, the sound of her laughing. I thought about every night I'd lain awake in the dark, grieving something I hadn't lost yet. I thought about the farmer's market and the apple she'd handed me and the way she'd held my hand. I thought about the 7 years. "You had 7 years." I said. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, left enough cash on the table to cover the bill and a generous tip, because the server had nothing to do with any of this and deserved to be paid well. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said. "I genuinely mean that, and I walked out of the restaurant. The drive home was quiet. I kept the radio off. Just drove through the city with the windows up, the heater running low, watching the streetlights pass. I didn't cry. I'd expected to cry. Maybe I was in shock. Maybe I was still in that strange, suspended place that lies between the ending of something and the moment it becomes real. I got home, sat in the driveway for a few minutes, the same way I had that October afternoon, more than 4 months ago, before any of this had started, or before I'd known it had started. Went inside, stood in the kitchen for a while, made coffee, drank it standing at the counter in my dress shirt, looking out the window at the dark backyard. And then something happened that surprised me. I felt lighter, not happy, not triumphant, not even particularly at peace. Just lighter, like something I had been carrying for months had finally been set down. The effort of it, the constant performance, the careful documentation, the measured patience, it was over. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to smile when I didn't mean it or nod along to plans I knew would never happen. It was done. It was over. And now, whatever came next, it was going to be real. The weeks that followed were complicated. I won't pretend they weren't. Claire tried repeatedly to reach me. Calls I mostly let go to voicemail. Messages I read without responding. A letter she left in the mailbox, handwritten, several pages full of explanations and apologies and pleas that were hard to read even when I reminded myself what she had done. Our families were a lot to navigate. Her mother called me in tears. Her brother left an angry voicemail that I deleted without finishing. My own family was steady, my brother especially, who showed up at my door the weekend after with pizza and beer and the extremely helpful offer of not asking me to talk about anything, unless I wanted to. I wanted to talk. Eventually. And he listened. That meant more than I can. Say the legal process was exactly as tedious and draining as I'd expected. Not contentious exactly. Claire didn't fight me, which I took as its own kind of admission, but emotionally exhausting in that particular way that formal endings are exhausting. Signing papers that undo promises you made in good faith. Dividing objects that seem to double in sentimental weight the moment their ownership became a question. We had a dog, Biscuit, a 4-year-old golden mix we'd adopted 2 years into the marriage. The dog was the hardest part. Biscuit stayed with me. There is a particular kind of grief that comes with the end of a long relationship. It's different from the grief of loss by death or accident, because the person is still there, but still in the world, still existing. But the version of them that lived inside your life is gone. The version that knew which mug you always reached for first. That remembered small things without being asked. That version is gone, and you grieve that version. Even when the person it belonged to turned out to be someone you never fully knew, I let myself grieve it. Quietly, mostly. On long runs with Biscuit through the park. Sometimes in the middle of a workday when something caught me off guard. A song, a smell, a date on the calendar that used to mean something. I let it move through me. Because I'd learned, in those months of holding everything together, that the cost of not feeling something doesn't make the something disappear. You either deal with it or it deals with you. 6 months after the anniversary dinner, I moved into a new apartment, 2nd floor of a converted Victorian on the north side of the city. Tall ceilings, big windows, hardwood floors that creaked in a specific pattern I quickly memorized. The kind of place that's full of character and slightly more drafty than ideal and completely, entirely mine. I painted the living room a deep slate blue, bought furniture I actually liked, not compromises between two peoples. Taste. Put Biscuit's bed by the biggest. Window so he could watch the street. Subscribed to a streaming service I'd always wanted and that Claire had always vetoed. These are small things. Embarrassingly small things, but there's a particular joy in small things when you've been through something large. I want to be honest about something before I finish this. There were moments, there were real, significant moments, where I wondered if I'd handled it wrong, not the leaving. I was never uncertain about the leaving, but the way I left, the months of silence, The calculated approach. The envelope at the dinner table, was it right? I still don't have a clean answer to that. Part of me believes it was the only way I could do it and still feel like myself at the end of it. If I'd confronted her in the heat of that first moment, standing in the kitchen with cold hands and a shattered chest, I wouldn't have protected myself. I would have said things I couldn't take back, made decisions I wasn't prepared for, let the wound drive me somewhere I'd regret. But another. Part of me knows that the months of performance had a cost. 2. There's something about pretending that grinds a person down in a way that pure grief doesn't. Grief at least moves. Grief at least feels true. Pretending is its own kind of lie, and even when you're doing it in service of something justified, it takes something out of you. I came through it, but I came through it changed. I still think about the October afternoon sometimes. The amber leaves, the engine ticking. The feeling of sitting in that driveway, not knowing that my life was about to split into a before and an after. I think about how ordinary it was, how completely ordinary. That's the thing about the moments. That change everything. They don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with ceremony or warning. They just happen. A turn of a key, a laugh through a door, and then the world you were living in is gone, and you're building a new one piece by piece, in a drafty Victorian apartment with creaky floors and a dog at the window. I don't have a tidy lesson to offer you. I don't have a clean moral. What I'll tell you is this. The truth always costs something, whether you go looking for it or whether it finds you, whether you act on it immediately or carry it quietly, for months while you build the life, raft before you finally let yourself fall into the water. It costs something, and then you pay the cost, and you keep going, that's all. You just keep going. Biscuit is asleep at my feet right now. It's quiet outside, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel like myself. That's enough. For tonight, that's more than enough.